People do forgive over time, so you can never say never. It's possible in the years to come. I see his father forgiving him, but I do not see his brother forgiving him.
Is Meghan has been brainwashed and he's been left out to dry. And I think that he's taken on everything that she feels and not what he feels.
Harry has, and I quote here, finally woken up to the truth about his wife Meghan Markle and is only staying in the marriage for the sake of the children.
Verbalising what many people think, and Harry's lost many of his friends because she wanted to control everything about his life. And I think that's the problem. It's only confirmation.
Her staff in Buckingham Palace were doing everything they could to help her, were doing everything they could to lie on her behalf. That the more she lies, the more credibility she's getting.
I just feel like she's a complete desperado at this point. I feel like there's nothing that she won't do to earn a living. She is so desperate for money. She will do absolutely anything.
Now, William, if he wants to, when he becomes king, he can strip Harry of his titles and try to pretend he's invisible.
I think Harry has behaved treacherously towards the family and to Britain in his book. He knows that William and Kate won't forgive him, and if he steps out of line yet again...
You encourage Harry and Meghan to do more, because the more they do, the more people realise this isn't right. This doesn't feel kind of cool.
Can't let them get away with it. I believe William has said that he will correct them when they make errors.
I hope.
Well, the future of Sussexes, I think, is pretty grim. I think that they're on a permanent decline. I mean, she will not tell the truth because she wants sensational headlines. That is the ultimate.
Every time William and Kate do something, Meghan and Harry are certain to respond.
When Queen Elizabeth II confided to a close friend that Meghan Markle had brainwashed Prince Harry, she wasn't just expressing frustration. She was identifying what she believed to be the catalyst behind the most devastating family fracture in modern royal history. If you want more deep dives like this, make sure to subscribe to Royal Archives. Tom Bower's explosive revelations paint a portrait of a monarch who watched helplessly as her grandson's once unbreakable bond disintegrated. And according to Bower's forensic research, the Queen traced it all back to one turning point. The question is, what did she see that made her draw that conclusion? The answer lies in timing. William and Harry weren't just brothers. They were survivors of the same childhood trauma, shaped by their mother's death in 1997. For 2 decades, that shared grief bound them together in ways the public could only glimpse from the outside. They worked as a unit, supported each other publicly and privately, built their royal duties around complementary roles. Then Meghan entered the picture, and within 3 years, those brothers weren't speaking. Here's what Bower uncovered through interviews with over 80 sources close to the royal family. When Meghan married Harry in May 2018, William had already expressed concerns. Not about Meghan herself, necessarily, but about the speed of everything. He'd suggested Harry take things slower, get to know her better before rushing into marriage. That advice didn't go over well. According to Bower, Meghan convinced Harry that William's staff were actively smearing her, not questioning, smearing. The distinction matters. And because once Harry believed his brother's household was leaking negative stories to the press, the relationship shifted from brotherly concern to perceived betrayal. And this is where the Queen's perspective becomes crucial. Elizabeth II had spent 70 years navigating palace politics, media manipulation, and family tensions. She understood the difference between legitimate criticism and coordinated attacks. She'd seen how paranoia could poison relationships, how suspicion, once planted, grew into something that couldn't be uprooted. When she watched Harry pull away from William, not because of what William said, but because of what Harry had been led to believe about William's intentions, she recognized a pattern. Bower reports that by the time Harry and Meghan announced their departure from royal duties in January 2020, and relations between the Fab Four, Harry, Meghan, William, and Kate, had completely broken down. Not strained, broken. The kind of fracture that doesn't happen overnight. At the heart of their divergence was Meghan's unwillingness to be part of a team, Bower wrote. There was no intimacy. But here's what social media discussions kept circling back to. How does a relationship that survived Diana's death military service, and decades of public scrutiny fall apart in under 2 years, the Queen, according to Bauer's sources, saw it differently than the public narrative suggested. This wasn't about two brothers growing apart naturally. This wasn't about different life paths or incompatible wives. This was about influence, about someone reframing every family interaction through a lens of victimhood and suspicion. Well, when Meghan refused the Queen's invitations to Balmoral during Elizabeth's lifetime, it sent a message. When she convinced Harry that the institution was against them rather than trying to guide them, it created an irreversible divide. When she positioned herself as someone who needed protection from the family rather than collaboration with them, it made reconciliation impossible. Bauer's most striking claim: the Queen believed that to her dying day, Harry had been disloyal, not rebellious, disloyal. That word choice matters when you understand how much Elizabeth valued duty, service, and family unity above personal feelings. She'd forgiven scandals. She'd weathered public relations disasters. She'd navigated divorces and embarrassments. But disloyalty, particularly when she believed it stemmed from outside influence, was something different. Critics of Bauer's work point out that he's relying on palace insiders and royal sources rather than direct quotes from the Queen herself. Fair enough. Elizabeth II wasn't known for airing private family grievances publicly, but multiple sources telling the same story about her private assessment carries weight. Because if the Queen genuinely believed Meghan had brainwashed Harry, it explains decisions that otherwise seem harsh, like expressing relief when Meghan didn't attend Prince Philip's funeral in April 2021. "Thank goodness Meghan is not coming," she reportedly told an aide. That's not the language of mild disapproval. That's the language of someone who felt the presence of a specific person would make an already painful day unbearable. During the Platinum Jubilee in 2022, King Charles, then Prince Charles, made sure Harry and Meghan wouldn't appear on the Buckingham Palace balcony or ride in royal carriages. They were private citizens attending a public event. Observers noted the stark visual difference between their treatment and that of working royals. And on September 8, 2022, when the Queen was dying at Balmoral, Charles called both his sons to come immediately. But when he heard Meghan intended to join Harry, he intervened. According to Bauer, Charles told Harry that Meghan's presence was unacceptable. Why? Because Meghan had refused those Balmoral invitations when the Queen was alive and well. Her presence at the Queen's death felt, he's to Charles and others, like optics rather than genuine grief. Sharing his grief with Meghan, who maligned the monarchy, was unthinkable, Bauer wrote. Charles believed his mother had been shocked by Harry's actions, and he wasn't willing to have someone who'd publicly criticize the institution present during its most private sacred moment. Harry was furious, Bauer reports, but Charles ended the argument by pointing out that Kate wasn't coming either, so Meghan hadn't been singled out. The difference? Kate had young children to care for and a logistical reason to stay behind. Meghan had neither. Across online royal watching communities, one question surfaced repeatedly. If the Queen truly believed Meghan was the cause of the brothers' split, why didn't she intervene more forcefully? Here's what longtime royal observers understand. The Queen operated within an institutional framework that valued stability over confrontation. She could advise, she could express disappointment privately, but she couldn't force adult royals to make different choices, especially when those royals lived overseas and operated outside the palace structure. What she could do, Nyken and what Bauer suggests she did, was make her assessment clear to those closest to her. She could ensure that when historians examined this period, there would be testimony about what she witnessed, about her concerns, about where she believed the influence originated. Bauer notes that Meghan positioned herself from the beginning as someone the institution had failed rather than someone who struggled to adapt to institutional requirements. Meghan had convinced quite a lot of people, especially in America and Africa and the Caribbean, that she was thrown to the wolves. Bauer told journalist Megyn Kelly, "Of course, that's completely untrue." His argument, Meghan received the same guidance, support, and resources offered to other royal newcomers. The difference was her response to that support. Instead of viewing palace staff as allies helping her navigate a complex role, she viewed them as obstacles, or worse, as conspirators actively working against her. And when she transmitted that worldview to Harry, it changed how he interpreted every family interaction. A brother's concern became an attack. Staff coordination became leaking. Institutional protocols became racism.
They didn't want him to be a prince or a princess, not knowing what the gender would be, which would be different from protocol.
The Queen, according to Bauer, watched this transformation with growing alarm. She'd seen charismatic outsiders enter the family before. Some adapted, some struggled but tried. Meghan, in her assessment, did neither. She demanded the family adapt to her. By Christmas 2019, Bauer claims Meghan was already in communication with her U.S. team about breaking away from the royal family. Harry would soon support the idea, right after watching the Queen's Christmas broadcast, which featured photos of the direct line of succession, but not him and Meghan. That broadcast became the final trigger. But the Queen's private view, according to Bauer's sources, was that the departure had been Meghan's plan all along. The royal platform was meant to boost her global profile, not become her permanent life's work. Many observers began pointing in one direction when trying to explain William and Harry's estrangement. Not toward institutional rigidity, not toward media pressure, as toward the influence that convinced Harry, his family, was his enemy. Tom Bauer's analysis doesn't stand alone. Multiple royal commentators, biographers, and insiders have made similar observations using different language. What makes Bauer's contribution significant is the specificity. The dates, the private comments from the Queen's circle, the pattern of decisions that only make sense if you accept the premise that Elizabeth II genuinely believed one person had redirected her grandson's loyalty away from his family. Whether it's fair or not, one name kept surfacing in those discussions. And it's the same name the Queen reportedly used when confiding to friends about who she believed had brainwashed Harry. As Bauer believes it's too late for William and Harry to reconcile, primarily because of what he calls Meghan's tendency to play the victim. As long as Harry views his family through that lens, as long as he interprets every past interaction as evidence of their failure rather than his misunderstanding, the brothers remain on opposite sides of an unbridgeable gap. The Queen died September 8, 2022, at 3:10 p.m. She'd reigned for 70 years and 214 days. In her final months, she was battling multiple myeloma, a form of bone cancer. But even facing her own mortality, the fracture between her grandsons weighed on her. Because for Elizabeth II, family wasn't just personal, it was institutional. The monarchy's future depended on the direct line of succession working together, supporting each other, presenting a united front. William and Harry's split didn't just break her heart as a grandmother, it threatened the stability she'd spent her entire reign protecting. And when she identified Meghan as the cause, she wasn't making a casual observation. She was delivering a verdict based on decades of experience, reading people, navigating power dynamics, and understanding influence. Tom Bauer's work forces an uncomfortable question. What if the Queen was right? What if the most analyzed, debated, and defended royal departure in modern history really does trace back to one person's influence over another? What if the brothers didn't grow apart? They were pulled apart. The public may never get a definitive answer. Harry and Meghan reject Bauer's entire premise. They've accused him of crossing from criticism into fixation, of constructing elaborate theories about people he's never met. Their spokesperson called his commentary deranged conspiracy and melodrama, but Bauer stands by his sources, and those sources include people who heard the Queen's private assessment firsthand, people who watched her react to Harry's choices with sadness that eventually hardened into something else. Resignation, maybe, or recognition that she'd lost him to an influence she couldn't counter. The tragedy isn't just that two brothers stopped speaking, it's that a monarch who valued family unity above almost everything else died believing one of her grandsons had been turned against his own blood. And she'd identified exactly who she thought was responsible. That's the revelation Tom Bower brought forward. Not speculation, not theory. The Queen's own words, shared in confidence, now part of the historical record. What we do with that information says as much about us as it does about them. If you found this deep dive compelling, there's more to uncover about what really happened behind palace walls during those final years. The full story is still unfolding. And the Queen's perspective, now revealed through Bower's reporting, adds a dimension we didn't have before. Subscribe to Royal Archives to stay updated as more emerges, because this isn't over, not even close.